have you ever really stopped to think about what information means? I mean, we throw that word around all the time, especially when we're talking about biology. We say a gene carries information, or that cells send signals. But is that just a handy metaphor, or is there something real, something deeper going on? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with this puzzle. On the one hand, you've got something like reading a book, using a symbolic code, a language to get meaning. On the other hand, you have DNA replication, a molecular code that builds a living thing. Now, we use the same kinds of words for both, right? Code, meaning, information. But is the info in your genes really the same kind of thing as the info in a sentence? That's the big question, and we're going to unpack it together.
And look, this isn't just some abstract debate for academics. The language of information, it's literally woven into the fabric of modern biology. We talk about the genetic code like it's a blueprint written in some special language. But what does that actually mean? When we say cells are signaling each other, are they having a timely conversation? You see, these questions force us to really think about what life itself is.
So yeah, what's the connection? Is there any real link between the information in the words you're reading right now and the mind-bogglingly complex stuff happening inside your own cells? To even start answering that, we have to go big. We have to look at the most ambitious claim out there. The idea that life isn't just described by information, but that it's actually made of it.
So yeah, some biologists and philosophers have put forward this huge idea that at its very core, life is an information processing system. Think about it like this. It's not just saying a computer uses information, but that the machine itself, the hardware, the software, the whole shebang, is fundamentally made of information. It's a pretty bold attempt to bring all of biology under one single powerful umbrella.
You can see why this is so appealing, right? It lets you imagine evolution as this giant cosmic computer constantly learning. It's taking in data from the environment, what food is out there, which predators to run from, and then encoding that survival guide directly into the DNA of the winners. It's a really neat, tidy, and honestly, a very cool picture of how life works. But is it right?
And right here is where we hit the major snag. The big problem with the life is information idea is that it might be taking a super useful metaphor and just stretching it too far, treating it like it's a literal fact. We say the brain is like a computer that helps us think, but we all know you're not going to find a CPU or a hard drive in your head. Well, we're running the same risk here.
And this really gets to the heart of it. I mean, what does it even mean for a physical thing, an organism with all its squishy chemicals and tissues, to be made of an abstract idea like information? If we get too caught up in that metaphor, we risk completely ignoring the messy physical reality of life. To understand something like cancer, you can't just look at the genetic code. You have to understand the metabolism, the physical environment of the cells, all the chemistry. You can't let the map replace the territory.
So, if that grand life is information idea has some serious limits, what's a better way to think about all this? Well, this is where we pivot. We're going to move away from the abstract philosophy and get our hands dirty with the concrete science of how living things actually work. We're going to talk about the science of signaling. Okay, so at its most basic level, signaling is actually pretty straightforward. It's just when one thing makes a physical cue that causes a change in another thing. Think about it like a hormone floating through your bloodstream. That hormone is the cue. It travels along until it bumps into a cell with the exact right receptor. That's the receiver, and when they connect, boom, it causes the cell to change its behavior. That's it. That's signaling.
Now, let's take that one step further and talk about communication. This is a really special kind of signaling, where both the sender and the receiver have been shaped by evolution specifically for this job. It's not a one-off thing. They've co-evolved. The classic example? A flower's bright color and a bee's eyes. They evolved together for this one specific purpose, to communicate.
And that, of course, brings us to a huge and fascinating question. If these communication systems are so vital for life, how on earth did they ever get started? I mean, how do you get a sender and a receiver to just pop into existence and start working together perfectly? It's a real puzzle, and scientists are using some pretty cool models to figure it out.
So for a communication system to get off the ground and actually stick around, it has to clear a few major hurdles. First, a signal has to come from somewhere. Then the whole system needs to be stable enough to last for generations. And here's the kicker. On average, it has to be a win-win for everyone involved. Think about a monkey giving a warning call for a predator. The call has to exist, others have to pay attention to it, and in the end, it has to help both the caller and the listeners survive. But what happens when what's good for the sender is bad for the receiver? Well, that's when things get really interesting. That's where you get deceptive signals, like a harmless bug evolving the bright colors of a poisonous one to trick predators. So you see, biological communication isn't always some happy, cooperative dance. It's often a high-stakes strategic game, a constant tug of war between cooperation and conflict, all shaped by evolution.
Okay, so now that we've got a solid handle on signaling and the evolutionary games that shape it, we can finally go back to where we started. It's time to connect the dots between the world of genes and cells and the incredible, uniquely human world of language.
So, how do they relate? Well, there are definitely deep connections or continuities. Both the signaling in our cells and the language we speak are products of evolution. They both exist to help coordinate what we do and influence behavior. But the differences, the discontinuities, are massive. Human language has grammar or syntax that lets us build infinite ideas from a few sounds. And maybe most importantly, our language involves conscious intention.
And this is really the bottom line. The meaning of a gene is just what it does. It's reliable, physical cause and effect. That's it. But the meaning of a word, that comes from a whole different universe of shared social rules, beliefs, and goals. It's like the difference between a key and the word key. A physical key's meaning is that it opens a specific lock. The word key only has meaning because we've all agreed it does.
So, why bother with all this? Why get so deep into these careful distinctions? Well, it matters because getting this right helps us understand our world and our own very strange and unique place in it with so much more clarity.
So let's wrap this up with the big takeaways. First, we've got to move beyond those simple, maybe a little too simple, life is information metaphors. Second, doing that lets us truly appreciate the amazing science of how real signaling systems work, which is crucial for everything from medicine to ecology. And finally, this careful thinking helps us see the whole picture, to understand how the molecular machines inside us and our ability to talk about them are all connected in one deep evolutionary story.
The philosopher Wilfrid Sellars put it perfectly. He said the goal of philosophy is to understand how things in the broadest possible sense of the term hang together in the broadest possible sense of the term. In other words, it's about seeing how all the different pieces of reality fit into one big, coherent picture. And by carefully picking apart a concept like information, we get a much clearer view of how the physical world of biology connects to the meaningful world of human experience.
And that leaves us with one last big question for you to chew on. What other powerful metaphors do we use in science all the time without even thinking about it? Things like the selfish gene or the brain as a computer. How might those be shaping our understanding in ways we don't even realize? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.